morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone watching online here in the Philippines and worldwide. Welcome to the Public Sector Productivity Webisodes. My name is Lorenzo, and I will be your moderator for today. Before we begin, I'd like to give a big warm shout out to the thousands in attendance today. We have the pleasure of being joined by agencies like the Securities and Exchange Commission, OCG, DOST, ITDI, the LGU of Balanga City, Bataan, DepEd Cavite Province, POP, COM Central, Philippine Ports Authority, Iligan City, Ombudsman Central Office, PPA, PMO Davao, and Naga Branch Office from GSIS Naga, and DAR Malay Balay City, Bukidnon. And to the many more in attendance again, welcome. Now, we at the Development Academy of the Philippines play a crucial role in nation building by 1, generating pioneering ideas, 2, promoting partnerships, and 3, capacitating stakeholders. And this is why we're hosting these webinars. We want to give you new ideas, we want to connect you with people, and we want to help you do better. With that being said, it's my pleasure to introduce to you today's experts. For our first speaker, he is a project officer of the Academy's Productivity and Development Center. He is currently the project manager of the Center of Excellence Public Sector Productivity Innovation Laboratory, where he assists government agencies in unlocking solutions to address critical issues to improve their services. He also serves as a lead facilitator in its various components, and recently he has ventured in assisting government agencies in installing the ISO 9001-2015 quality management system in their organizations. With over 25 years of experience in property and hospitality management, human resource management, marketing and communications, and organizational development, he is a firm believer of knowledge sharing. For him, knowledge is like a torch. Sharing your flame does not diminish your fire. It actually magnifies your light as well as we all make this world a better place. For our second speaker, she is an associate project officer of the Academy's Productivity and Development Center. As a project manager, she has been assisting beneficiary agencies of the Government Quality Management Program on the development of ISO 9001-2015 Quality Management System. She also serves as a resource person, facilitator for trainings on 5S Good Housekeeping, ISO 19011 Auditing Management Systems, and root cause analysis and corrective action formulation. She has also managed various capacity building activities on innovating the public sector. She has also served as lead facilitator for various innovation workshops and assisted various government agencies in co-creating innovation projects. She is also a firm believer of the power of empathy in creating innovations. Let us all welcome Mr. Adrian Ramirez and Ms. Leanne Lozañes. Okay, good afternoon, Sir Adrian and Ms. Leanne. The floor is yours.
操作している人たちがすごくこれを今回カフェで働いてみるとか接客するっていうことを楽しいと思えるんであれば、それは AI にせっかく人が楽しいと思えることを AI にやらせるなんて私は違うと思っていて。
That is just a sample of an innovation that we see being born today. This is a robot that is not being powered by artificial intelligence, but yet it is powered remotely by people who have difficulties working in public spaces. So this is an astounding innovation that really responds to the needs of the people. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Introduction to Innovative Thinking module. And before we move on, I would like to just post you this question and feel free to answer in the chat box. With the video that you've seen, first ask yourself, is this innovation relevant? Are innovations relevant? Do we need innovations like these, especially in our country, in the Philippines? And finally, are we ready? I think that's the more difficult question. Are we ready for innovations like these, or are we ready to innovate? So hopefully, within the next hour, we give you an idea of the answers to those questions and to a lot more that we will unfold throughout this afternoon. My name is Adrian, and people call me Adi. I'm with the Development Academy of the Philippines Productivity and Development Center, specifically for the Public Sector Productivity Innovation Laboratory. And with me is the lovely Leanne Lozañes. She's also with the Government Quality Management Program Office of the Productivity and Development Center. And together, we are partners in advocating innovation and innovative thinking in the government. And we hope we can make a difference in you this afternoon. Good afternoon, Leanne.
Good afternoon, Adi, and welcome to everybody who are tuned in here in our webisodes. It's nice to see everybody. We are graced by 2,300 or so na participants in this webinar, and it's really nice. We've been planning for this for quite a few weeks already, and it's nice to finally have this opportunity to share with you how to become innovative in the public sector. I think we are all ready. I've seen here in the chat box a lot of interactions ongoing, so keep them coming, guys. And we are really excited to engage with you in our session.
First and foremost, we would like to ask, we talk about innovation. Let's have a common understanding of what innovation is. There are a lot of definition of innovations if you search it on Google. So it's really quite hard to articulate and to really put it into writing. But for the purpose of this exercise, we have lifted the definition of innovation from the Philippine Innovation Act of 2018. And it says there that innovation is the creation of new ideas. It is the result of a development of new or improved products, processes, and services. The key word here is improve. Innovation doesn't really need to be new like an invention or something that is really grandiose or very disruptively different. It is an improvement of something existing. And also noteworthy, it is both a process and a product. It can also be a person, and it can also be an action. Okay, so that is how we like to introduce innovation to you. Contrary to what you think, we innovate every day. We just do not know it. We just don't know our structure to it. But every day we do things differently to improve our day-to-day lives. But the question is, are these innovations that we do important, relevant, and successful?
So talking about successful innovations, and we might have seen that not all innovations are successful. Let's say, for example, in the early 21st century, we've seen a lot of innovations in terms of how we communicate, how we send or share information. We have seen the rise of mobile phones, and in that context, we've seen Nokia dominate the entire mobile phone industry. But somehow, over the past few years, during that time, Nokia suddenly fell out of the picture, and big companies like Apple and Android and Samsung were the ones who dominated the cell phone industry. In this sense, not all innovations are successful. And why do you think is that so? Probably it's because they fail to follow this formula. The first thing that we need to consider is this one.
Desirability. The first component of a successful innovation is desirability. People must want it. It should address a certain need. In relation to the earlier video, it addresses the needs of people who have trouble in working in public spaces. So it should be anchored to a certain need that will satisfy or that will answer for the people. And that's the first component that you need to satisfy.
And also, you need to make sure that the innovations that you are going to build are feasible. This means that it can be made and it can be turned into something real. It doesn't stop at the level of ideas alone. You need to turn those brilliant ideas, those innovations that you have in mind, into something real, into something tangible, something that people can actually experience, so that you'll know that these innovations will actually be really desirable.
And finally, I think this is where most innovations fail. This is the hardest aspect of innovation to be successful. It is viability. An innovation should stand the test of time. It should respond to the changing needs of the world. This is the VUCA world. For those who do not know what VUCA is, it means volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And now it's disruptive with the pandemic thing going on. We need to ensure that our innovations will have tools and are equipped with the ability to respond to those changes and really stand those changing needs. And that this viability aspect, I think, is one of the hardest to achieve in our innovations if we do not do it right.
In that sense, we know what innovation is all about. We know what it takes for our innovations to be successful. Now, let me ask you this question. Have you met someone like this one? Do you know who she is? And you can type it here sa chat box if you know this person or if you know this one, if you're familiar with this. I think I can see a lot of interactions going here in our chat box.
I know, but some of our students call her Dr. Ramirez.
Maybe someone from the DOH. There, I can see it. Dr. Dao, physician or
Health
health
worker.
worker. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's almost there. Have you ever met her? I think I saw someone.
Yes,
mention-
someone mentioned her name.
She is actually Kira. And Kira is a chatbot. Kira stands for Katuwang na Impormasyon para sa Responsableng Aksyon. Kira is very interesting because she is one of the earliest COVID-19 response of the government created by the DOH and their tech partners. So si Kira, siya ay accessible via Facebook Messenger and Viber. And ang task niya is basically parang self-assessment siya. You just have to chat Kira and there are logarithms that are in place there that will actually allow you to get responses about your symptoms if you have symptoms on COVID. So during that time, during the height of the pandemic last year, I think it was in early March or April when Kira was launched. During that time, Kira really was needed by the government. And right now, I think she is still needed because, of course, may mga challenging times pa rin tayo in terms of our capability ng ating hospitals to admit patients. Kira helps with the communication with the Filipino people. So basically, Kira meets the first formula for successful innovation, which is desirability. Second, during that time, at the height of the pandemic, Kira was actually immediately implemented. During that time, sobrang baba lang nung information or babaw ng mga information na nakukuha from Kira. But right now, you will be amazed on how Kira actually works right now. She was improved over the past few months. And of course, it's still sustained. We are still using it nowadays. As a matter of fact, Kira is now integrated with other IATF platforms like yung Tanod COVID ng DILG, barangay reporting system natin sa DILG, di ba? Mga kabarangay DILG. And also si DOST Faster. Yung DOST Faster, yung ating data monitoring, integrated na rin siya si Kira. So, talking about sustainability and viability of solutions, of innovations, Kira meets all of those. The application or the chatbot was able to be sustained and made relevant even to present time. And it was made more powerful because it integrated a lot of systems in the government as well.
That is an innovation that entails digitization and computerization. Sometimes you have that notion that in order for our innovations to be successful, we need to be grandiose or we need to really spend a lot, or it means being able to respond to the cyber world. But mind you, that is not the case always. So as long as your innovation meets a certain desire of your stakeholders, it is implementable and it is viable, then it can be successful. I would like to direct your attention to this video.
South Korea, a country devoid of oil. Seoul, a city where 1/4 of Koreans live, with one of the world's highest gasoline consumption. The situation is getting worse. Car usage is increasing. Petroleum costs are rising. Parking spaces are scarce. People are stressed out. Every day, a Seoul driver wanders 500 meters to find a parking space. In a month, this equals 15 kilometers or 1 liter of gas. S-Oil, one of the 4 oil companies in Korea, took action. It is on a mission to save oil. Right here, right now. Thus begins the HERE campaign. It has set up a HERE balloon for each parking space. As a car parks in it, the balloon falls. When the car exits, the balloon rises. Cars can spot these balloons from afar. They can spot open parking spaces without wandering. Finding quick parking means saving oil. one easily spotted parking spot is worth 1 liter of oil saved.
교육하실 때 엄마들은 한 저것만큼 경제적인 게 없다고
딱 이정표가 있으니까 참 뭐 좋은 아이디어 같아요.
주차장에서 항상 가니까 신기했어요.
풍선 없었으면 못 들어오는 거죠.
Here balloons have saved drivers' gas expenses through a new and interesting method. S-Oil, the oil seller, gained the impression of an oil-saving company. Save oil. Save time. Save money. Here, taking action for a better world. Save oil. Save Earth. S-Oil.
We can have a lengthy discussion on this video. I see in the chat box that you're impressed. It doesn't need to be IT driven, yes, and it doesn't really need to be grandiose or expensive. But I think the most important point of this video is, well, let's try to look at the 3 aspects of a successful innovation first. How desirable can it be? How people-centered can it be when an oil company launches a drive for people to save oil? That's one. It's so people-oriented, not really driven by profit. But of course, it will turn around. It will go back to them as the economy rises, oil consumption rises. Plus, it is a very good PR campaign. But then, the solution is right at the heart of the problem of the people. Implementable, it is not expensive. All it needed was a balloon. And viability. I think it is very sustainable because the National Science of Teaching Association now are converting those here balloons into biodegradable ones to address the future problems that it may entail. Your innovations can be successful also as long as you base it on those 3 components and base it on a certain need for the people. Now, we at the government, that is our aim, really, bring ourselves closer to the people. That is one of the challenges that is being posed to us, is for us to really enhance our relationship and social fabric of the citizens. My question is, do we need to innovate? Oh, of course we do. Why do we need to innovate in the government when we can very well leave it to the private sector to innovate and to make the economy rise? But how important is it for us in the government to be innovative as well? Leanne, I posed you that question.
Yeah, and I think it's very relevant nowadays, especially since we have a lot of existing policies and guidelines. And as we all know, a lot of things are already changing. And so we in the government must also do everything we can to become innovative as well. Now, let me share with you one of the striking examples of why we need to innovate and improve our systems and practices in the government. South Korean former foreign minister Kang Kyung-hwa mentioned in one of her interviews that the South Korean people are very demanding and expects the highest standards from government services. And I think in the Philippines also, we are experiencing the same. Nowadays, the needs and expectations of our citizens are really, really complex. That's why we at the government, we need to really improve the standards, even the practices and the processes that we have at present. So I hope that this session will actually give you some of the insights that you can to help you come up with innovative perspectives as well as solutions to address particular issues of your constituents.
Yeah, and relative to the subject of this webinar is innovative thinking, to show you how it is to innovate. Now, what are the different tools? How do we come up with innovations like that? Relevant, meaningful innovations. Well, there are a lot of tools and a lot of frameworks and a lot of paradigms that people follow, ideating and creating innovations. But we here at the DAP, PSP Innovation Laboratory, we are advocates of the co-creation innovation process. This is patterned after the design thinking process that integrates the aspects of other schools of thought like the agile and the lean methodology. And we are able to integrate that for us to contextualize the design thinking and the process to the government sector. And in definition, it is an iterative process that highlights problem-solving solutions through out-of-the-box thinking and collaboration. Please take note of the last bullet, says that we we consider the stakeholders as co-designers, not just as interviewees. I think this is one of the aspects that makes co-creation innovation process different. We try to involve the stakeholder or the end user every step of the way. How do we do that? We cannot really ask them, if ever we're designing for the farmers, we couldn't ask the farmers to report to the office and be part of the design team. We have placed different tools and ways for us to include them. If you would notice in the previous slide, there is empathy in the middle. Empathy is our tool to make sure that we include them every step of the way. And I think that is the heart and soul of the co-creation innovation process.
This is not your typical problem-solving technique or tool, because usually problem-solving processes or tools and techniques, usually it's a one straight flow. But in the co-creation innovation process, it actually feels like a squiggle. It feels something like this. It first starts with an uncertainty. It's not a straight line. It's not a straight process. We begin with uncertainty. Some uncertain problems, uncertain conditions that our stakeholders are experiencing. And then we end with focus. We single out a particular solution out of the messy things that we have discussed. We put focus into one solution that will work best for our stakeholders.
This is so. It really looks really ambiguous because we employ these two modes of thinking, the divergent and the convergent thinking. The CCIP, the co-creation innovation process, entails these two modes of thinking. The divergent one is when you think of all the possibilities and you really brainstorm and you really open up your mind to the world. No? But convergent thinking, on the other hand, is when you funnel and when you focus. Again, we do this every day. When the moment you wake up, you would diverge. Anong gagawin ko? What are my appointments today? You diverge. You try to recall your calendar. What will I do first? You converge. What will I wear? You diverge on your wardrobe. How do I want to wear them? You converge on the style. But what we are doing here in the co-creation innovation process is we're putting a structure into it. We try to plot it in the process so that we can maximize these modes of thinking. And you will be surprised. Sometimes you are almost converging and diverging at the same time. So there are times that you do that in the process. So please do not be disheartened and just trust it. And you will, as Leanne said, will end up funneling in and having focus. Let's do convergent and divergent thinking. So first, let's diverge. Let's think of the many possibilities of how might we implement physical distancing. Be as crazy and as wild as you can. Type your answers in the chat box. Now that we are opening the economy and people are now going out because we really need to get the nation going, how do we then implement physical distancing despite that COVID still being here and we are slowly opening our economy and really bringing commerce back into life? Be as wild as you can. Attached meter stick. Yes, Kurt, that's really nice. Me, maybe I can wear a hula hoop. As crazy as that, I can wear a hula hoop so that no one can come near me.
Me, I'll try to have electric shock that has a very low intensity that when people tries to come near me, they will be electrified.
An electrifying umbrella. Pathways, trackers of individuals who will prompt loudly. Maybe that tracking device now on your phone, that when someone comes near you, it will like create a sound or a buzz or it will alarm. That's nice. Or I can just wear a shirt with a design saying, I am COVID positive, stand back. Bluetooth distancing, extend your arms to signal distance. Yes. Okay, we have just diverged, guys. Now let's converge. I am interested in that phone app that alarms when somebody comes near you. What is the first thing that we need to do to implement that, to have that into a reality? First, siguro, no, I would look for a designer of the app.
Or try to secure a budget first, right?
Benchmarking. You would benchmark and see if there are existing apps similar where you can imitate or you just pattern it into. Looking for the designers. We have converged. Let's diverge again. I want to find a designer of the app. Where can I find designers that are capable? Facebook? Sponsors, yeah? The directory, the knowledge bank, internet. Those are the ways where you can. So we are diverging again of different possibilities where we could accomplish a certain task that we have converged on. DICT, perfect, yes. This is just an exercise to show you on how we can maximize or put into context divergent and convergent thinking. In less than a minute, we are able to diverge, converge, and diverge again into a certain challenge. Okay, so that's how we do it in the co-creation innovation process.
Now that we know the modes of thinking to help us set the right mindset as we go through the entire co-creation innovation process, we also have basically principles that will actually guide us throughout the entire process. And the first one, our first principle, talking about desirability of innovations, of course, we need to make things matter and empathize with our stakeholders. So here, we focus on the user, we step into their shoes and understand what are their experiences. We look at their pains and gains, what motivates them, what makes them frown, and try to take that perspective as we build something innovative for them. Just like what the famous saying goes, unless you're customer-centric, you might be able to create something wonderful, but you're not going to survive. So we have to make sure that our innovations are driven with a purpose. And that purpose is basically to address the needs of our stakeholders.
The next principle is practicing radical collaboration. Now, this is very interesting. As an innovator, you need to collaborate or brainstorm with people who are a lot different from you. And that is a sign of a good innovator when they try to take the perspective of diversity. So the more heterogeneous an innovation team is, the better. People like accountants collaborating with artists, with dancers across different age groups, across different social status, age, gender preferences, across different gender identities, artists collaborating with accountants, with businessmen. And in that way, you're able to get a multi-perspective stand on an issue. And then you get to learn from them. At the same time, they get to learn from you. So it's a mutually beneficial endeavor to really make sure and to collaborate with people of diverse characteristics and skill sets.
And the next principle talks about fueling your imagination with data. Now, what we did a while ago was actually to fuel our imaginations, right? Anything goes, anything can happen, and we can build anything. And ideas can actually come from anywhere. It can be from your imagination, or it can also come from basically crowdsourcing. We've seen a lot of people throwing in questions and posting some challenges, and people are actually typing or giving their suggestions to improve a particular condition. And we use that as an inspiration here in our process. And we welcome here wild and crazy ideas, regardless of who shared that idea. And we use that data, even if we fuel our imaginations with a lot of inspirations, we always have to use data to keep us grounded. And this data can also come from everywhere. It can come from feedback of your customers or your clients, can come from feedback from your management, or from previous experiences of those implementing the same solution. So what's important is we won't be limited in terms of our imagination and in terms of our inspirations as well.
We should, as innovators, must have a certain level of optimism. Since we are innovating and we are venturing into something new, naturally, we will be embracing the unknown. There will be a big hole of ambiguity because most of the time, we will be facing problems for the first time. And if we do not have that level of optimism that is required for an innovator, most probably we would quit on the first try. Always believe in yourself and believe that something good will come out of it, and that the stumbling blocks are just stumbling blocks that you can get over with. I would always use this as an example. I'm almost 50 years old, and at the time of the pandemic, I was really like, the internet was an alien to me. This webinar jam, the Zoom, the different apps are just like scared me like I was a little child. But then with the little optimism and the little help from Leanne and my group, we are able to respond to what the needs of the people. Optimism is very important for an innovator.
We also have to think big and start small. Now, we often hear people say that you have to dream big in order to achieve something. And they say that ambition and vision go together. Now, if your ambition is very small, if your dream is very small, then you can also accomplish very small. So we have to dream big to create wonderful things. But of course, we always have to start small. Just like what Miss Universe 2018 says, the journey for 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And so we have to start small to mitigate losses of early failures. Some small-scale implementation can actually enable us to focus our energies and resources to capitalize on the momentum that we're going to build. Small initiatives affect small groups, but actually aim positive impact in a billion years. So that's what we want when we build or when we try to develop innovations for our stakeholders.
And next is implement and iterate. This is very important because since innovations are supposed to address a certain need, you need to implement right away. Just like the Kira app, when the need arose, it had to be implemented immediately. As we always say here in innovation, done is better than perfect because you can always iterate along the way to respond to those changes and to meet the rising demands. But if you do not implement right away, it will become useless because it might not be able to address the current need or the problem that you are trying to solve.
We also have our next principle, which talks about learning from failure. As we've said, there could be innovations that are actually not successful or unsuccessful, but co-creation is actually inspired by the desire to learn from, offer, and embrace failure. So trying out crazy ideas means bucking expert opinion and taking big risks. It means not being afraid to fail because as you fail forward, fail fast, fail frequently in order for us to gain knowledge on how we can further improve our solutions. And we use that to fuel us to improve later on our solutions.
And finally, I think this is my favorite and should be yours too. Just have fun. A relaxed mind is a creative mind, especially in innovative thinking. You need to really sit back, and just try to feel that creativity juice flowing. And you are not able to do that if you do not know how to have fun. So in innovating, sometimes you would interject tools, fun games and interventions that would keep the brainstorming session alive and fun and really engaging, because I think that is key to coming up with a really brilliant and really nice idea and a creative one too. So now that we have talked about the principles of the co-creation innovation process, let us walk you through the process. So we still have a few minutes to walk you through the co-creation innovation process. If you would notice in the middle, it says there empathy. As I said, that is our tool to make sure that we include the stakeholders every step of the way. And as you also notice, it is cyclical. Although there is like step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, it is not really a linear one because it is a squiggle. Sometimes implement ka na, you come back to define. And then when you define, you go straight to scale up. So that is how you do it. But we will just describe to you the different stages and try to make you experience it. First, let's talk about empathy. Empathy is, again, like innovation and love. This is really very hard to define. But empathy is really understanding your stakeholders. When you say empathy, the first thing that comes to mind is putting yourself into one's shoes. But for me, I think empathy is more of crying with the person and not crying for the person. So there's a big difference, no? So in empathy, we see with them. We do not see for them. And this tool will help us first define the problem, define the state, and see where we really are at the moment. So there are different defined tools that would help you frame a challenge and understand your problem, because always, or the co-creation innovation process starts with the problem. Because if you do not define the correct problem, most probably you will not have the correct solution. So let's start with defining the problem. The define stage entails framing the innovation challenge, gathering data and tools to support that, and to really dig deep into that problem. These are just some tools that we use to define or frame our challenge.
In defining a problem and framing the challenge, we often do interviews. Now, take note, this is different from your typical surveys that you aim to get generalizations from a particular issue. Here, what we want is to gather their experiences. What is it about their stories? We want to know the stories of our stakeholders and try to listen to them firsthand about what their experience is. So sometimes when we do our sessions, we go out there to the field and try to talk to people and try to understand what is it that they are experiencing and try to encourage them to tell us their stories and make use of that stories to fuel our imagination and empathize really with them.
Another thing is observation. Sometimes you do not really need human intervention or face-to-face talks. All we need to do is observe, especially if you are trying to dig deep into a process or a service. No, sometimes you will just go to that area and try to see what the different choke choke points are, where people are having a hard time. And now that we are in the new normal, I would like to flex this new way of really observing people online. It's called digital anthropology, especially when you would like study a group of people. For example, OFWs. You would look for online communities like OFW Tambayan online, Facebook groups, online groups, co-op groups. You will go there and try to observe, see their demeanor, the way they speak, their problems, their aspirations, their goals, even their demographics and psychographics. You can get it from there. So that is a new tool that I think we should take advantage of, especially now that we are in the new normal and in the online state, online world.
We also have immersions. Now, this is typically done for a long-term solution. We immerse with a particular community, a particular group of people to get to know their life world. How is life there in the community in order for us to come up with meaningful social innovations. Sometimes when we have for social projects like social innovations like programs to improve a particular set of community or a particular group of people, we can do immersions to understand better what are their experiences are. Let's try to have an activity. So this will be very brief. We will be posting here on the chat box, and let's try to rank which we are going to work on today. So let's try to have a very brief exercise, and the challenge for us is to how are we going to improve government frontline services. Now we have to select first a focus area because in Define we said that we start with the problem. So let's try to look for, or let's try to vote for the top priority of this team. Okay, please kindly type it here on the chat box so that we can monitor it. So we will be giving you around a minute to work on this. Okay, there we can see already a lot of responses from our participants. And hello to the 2,600 people here in our webisode. So I think we are all over the Philippines. Okay, so I think we have here, looks like process management is going first. There you go. Okay, so now that we have selected our focus area, this time I will show you our challenge for this particular focus area. So let me direct you to this slide. So we're talking about process management. So we're looking at here, how are we going to efficiently and effectively implement our processes, right? So our challenge for this afternoon to our participants is this. How might we provide fast, easy, and convenient frontline transactions? So from the overall or for the most generic question of how might we improve government services, we've zeroed into process management. We post you another challenge on providing fast, easy, and convenient frontline transaction. Now, what's next after defining the challenge?
Yeah, now we go to the ideate phase. We still have a few minutes left. Now that we have a challenge, now it's time for us to ideate. There are a lot of tools as well that we use. But I would like to reiterate again, the ideation phase does not start with creating a solution. It still starts with the problem. The first thing that we need to do is to reframe that problem, because we want to make sure that the data that we gather, that with those data we are able to focus and come up with a meaningful problem. And what are the different, just a sample of the ways how we reframe. First, we have this revolution technique. The revolution technique is when you try to challenge the different assumptions that is around you. For example, in the slide, it says that getting cured is important to patients. You can always take a different perspective. Rather than just getting cured, staying well is more important. So you challenge those assumptions. You try to revolutionize it and try to look at it in a different perspective. For example, the second example says collecting payment is important to us. But more than collecting payments, I challenge that. Sustainability is more important, and collecting payment is just part of it. So try to look at it, try to break those silos and break those preconceived notions so that for you to come up with a different perspective. In contrast to opposite thinking, this is more radical. No? In opposite thinking, try to take the opposite stand. No? How do you do that? For example, the assumption is millennials want to save money. Now, I will challenge that. I'll take the opposite. Millennials want to spend money. Well, no offense to the millennials or people in general. People want to spend money rather than just saving. They save to spend. Or, for example, in the voting system, the assumption is people can only vote in the precincts. I will take the opposite. People can vote in the convenience of their own homes. And then you ID it from there. Those are just techniques on how to reframe or try to have a different look at your problem.
Now, we also make use of these other tools and techniques. We have the Crazy Fours and Crazy Eights, and basically the objective is for us to generate solution variations of a particular challenge. So the more, the merrier. The more abundant your solution is, the better. That's the objective of Crazy Fours and Crazy Eights. Now, we also have the Scamper technique, and Scamper basically means substitute, combine, adapt, modify, magnify, minify, put to another use, eliminate, rearrange, and reverse. This Scamper technique helps us come up with creative solutions to address a particular issue. It allows us to think think creatively of different things to help us address a particular issue.
I think this is my favorite. It's called related world. When you try to IT or think of a solution, we do this all the time. No? It's some people call this benchmarking or finding inspirations, but you use an alternative solution. You try to look at a different world or industry that is encountering similar problems and try to adapt that technology to your world, to yours. Okay, just an example, Leanne. Can you show me an example from the related world?
So we have here the restaurant meets airport. So in this restaurant meets airport example, some say that they are both experiencing a particular issue. And what do you think is that issue? It's something related to the conveyor belt. And the issue is basically trying to transport one item from one person to another. In the case of the airports, trying to transport the luggages of the passengers from the airplane going to the porters, going to the passengers. The same is true within restaurants. We have here transporting the orders from the kitchen, going to the waiters, going to the customers. What this sushi restaurant did was to make use of the technology of the conveyor belt to serve as an inspiration in designing their Take What You Can sushi bar. So they made use of this conveyor belt to transport the orders easily. So what lesson can we learn from Related World? It's basically we can find an abundance of inspiration from all around you. And you just have to make sure that you're aware of those solutions, just like what this sushi restaurant did. Who would have thought that conveyor belts can be used in the context of restaurants, right? The same is true whenever we're going to do benchmarking and other related activities. Let's try to contextualize solutions or practices from other worlds in our own organization. Let's just recap our challenge. How might we provide fast, convenient, and easy frontline transactions? Okay, so let's try to think of solutions. Try to respond, try to share with us how can we improve our frontline services. Post there on the chat box. So we'll be giving you a few minutes, perhaps 1 minute, to share with us what are your ideas. How can we improve our frontline services? There you go. I can see a lot of responses already. Lessen bureaucracy, online transactions, doing service with a smile. Nice. Digitized but improve the signal. Internet connectivity is an issue here. Streamlining the procedures, increasing benefits, training the frontliners, standardizing the responses, okay, that can help in communicating with our customers, our clients. We've seen a lot of information here. It looks like lessen bureaucracy is the most important thing for them. Now, when we try to create solutions on how we're going to lessen bureaucracy, the question is how. So this would involve different techniques as well. You can streamline your processes. Maybe you can come up with a one-stop shop portal wherein all of the government agencies are in that one-stop hub. All of the requirements are there. You don't need to move an inch. All of our systems are integrated in the government. So you can just access that portal or that hub. Then you can get out of that transaction immediately. That's how you think about solutions. Now, the more solutions that you can think of, or the better for you have a grasp of what solutions are you going to work on later on.
So we've already done define. We've also done ideate. Now we go to implement. Just a brief description of what it takes to implement in the co-creation innovation process. As I said, We have empathy tools to ensure that this step is in coordination with the desires of our stakeholders. So we need to come up with an implementation plan and a way to monitor the success of your solutions. Like we come up with success measures and plot them together, set milestones, roadmaps, and then try to see how this can stand the test of time so that it can be viable because it leads to scaling up. Scaling up is our viability card. This is the way to ensure that our innovations are viable by trying to document all the life of your innovations, so that you can have notes for expansion. It is very important for you to document because since we expect this to be there for a long time, we want our innovations will foster long before we are gone, long before we have retired, and the new blood are already coming in to sustain your innovations. So you need those documented information for them to refer to so that your innovations will not die.
So that's the entire co-creation innovation process. So if you want to know more about the programs of the DAP on innovations, just visit our website, visit or contact the COE project team, and they will automatically divert you to us to help you launch your innovation project. So we are going to end this session with a note from Steve Jobs. He is one of our favorite innovators all around the world. And he says that innovation is actually the ability to see change as an opportunity and not a threat. Just like what we experienced in the past few years, in the past few months with the COVID-19 pandemic. Even if we experienced a lot of changes because of the pandemic, but our government did not stop in delivering the services. We saw it as an opportunity to really improve the delivery of our services, change our approaches in the way we do things in the government, and basically revolutionize the way we approach things. So I hope that this session enlightened you a lot. And another thing that we want to share with you is this quote from A Bug's Life. Now is the time for us to really think weird, think crazy, and because that is actually something that we need from the government. Okay, we need people who think not only outside the box, but thinking inside the box and finds a way to navigate inside the box to find his way out, just like Houdini. Okay, and create spaces where innovations and creativity can foster because modern problems actually require modern solutions. So if you always think how you always think, you will always get what you always got. I hope that will motivate you to keep on innovating. And I think we will now turn you over to Sir Enzo for the Q&A portion.
Yeah, just in the nick of time. So we are now opening the floor for questions. Thank you very much for staying.
Thank you, Sir Adrian and Miss Leanne, for that wonderful session. If I could just take one thing from your presentation, it's the squiggly drawing. It's the squiggly line drawing, no? Because for me, that encapsulates everything about being innovative. No? You embrace uncertainty and then you focus everything towards that change that you want to see. Okay, so without further ado, we'll move on to our Q&A session. As mentioned before, the team has been curating questions from the chat box, and we have chosen a few to be answered live. For the sake of time, we'll just choose a few. Our first question comes from Miss Maila Pascual. Good afternoon. How do you convince decision makers to innovate when the first question is this? Are there agencies practicing or implementing this?
I think I saw that question and I really found that interesting. For me, what's really challenging for us in the government is that we have a lot of restrictions, and our managers, basically their thinking is that how are we going to make sure that this solution will work? Am I going to manage the resources, or how am I going to allot resources for this innovation when I don't know yet the results? And that's why in the co-creation innovation process, we introduce the concept of prototyping, the concept of failing early in order for us to succeed sooner, making prototypes in order for us to test immediately the solution, the implementability, the viability of our solution, and try to build on those feedback and test the prototypes through feedback gathering from our stakeholders in order for us to gain significant details on how we can further improve our systems or the innovations that we're going to develop. Another is that we also try to include the management as part of the ones building the solution. So if they are on board in the process, then perhaps they can also sponsor the project and try to really invest in this project. So in terms of gathering data, are these implemented in other agencies? That's why we do related world, for example. That's why we test our ideas before we actually invest a lot of resources, effort, and time to make that idea realizable.
Me naman, I would like to bring you to principle number 1. Empathize and make it matter. Take note that your superiors are your stakeholders as well. Stakeholders are not just the end users. Stakeholders are the ones who are affected and can affect the life of your problem or your project. So if you treat your heads of agencies as stakeholders, first thing you need to do is empathize and know how it matters to them. So yung with them, yung what's in it for me nila, no? You need to take a look at that. And just like what Leanne said, since they are a stakeholder, they should be involved every step of the way. So I think empathy here is the key to really opening the eyes of the people we would be needing approval from.
Our next question comes from Ricardo Varela. They say, can you comment on Steve Jobs' famous quote, innovation is saying no to 1,000 things before you say yes?
Leanne can just answer that because Steve Jobs is her favorite, no? I'm talking about how Steve Jobs failed before he even got the success. So learn from failure and maintaining optimism is the key, right, Leanne?
As a matter of fact, Steve Jobs experienced a lot of rejections from different people. I remember watching one particular show. It's called The Dragon's Den.
Dragon's Den, yeah.
And Steve Jobs actually presented his concept of the iPad to investors. And as a matter of fact, in his first presentation, he was outrightly rejected. And I think that's basically, sometimes we experience that along the way whenever we are trying to pursue innovations. And I think most agencies actually have a lot of experience in terms of that, saying we experience a lot of no's, be it, for example, for our participants in PMDP who are tuned in here, maybe they are actually saying that we experience a lot of no's in our capstone projects or even in our thesis defense. We experience having a lot of no's, a lot of revisions, and so on and so forth. But I think that actually makes it beautiful. That's what makes our innovations more meaningful, because we experience the no's. That's why we are actually having a lot of rooms for improvement. It actually fuels our drive to further improve our system. So I hope that I was able to answer the question.
Just to reiterate that, let's just turn you over to the principle of maintaining optimism. As I said, as an innovator, you should not quit on your first failure. You expect a lot of no's. You expect a lot of mishaps. That's why you have tools like prototyping, prototype testing, stakeholder consultations. You have that. And those events will really show you that there are a lot to improve in your innovations. So you have to maintain this certain level of optimism because you are venturing into the unknown. There is ambiguity. This is an innovation. This is something new. So most probably you would fail. And if you fail, all you need to do is just try again.
Our last question comes from Dina Sarne. She asks, is innovation thinking acquired or innate?
Innovation, as always, I would say in my class, innovation is not just a skill. Innovation can be acquired, but innovation is a way of life. It's not even a career, it's a vocation. It's a state of mind. You can learn it, but you will always have to live it. There are a lot of ways for you to innovate. There are a lot of tools that can help you, that can equip you. But if you do not inculcate it, embrace it as part of your lifestyle, I don't think you will be able to innovate. No matter how much tools we bombard into you, if you do not embrace that culture, most probably you will not be able to advance. That's my take on it.
I think innovation is both. It's innate, and it's actually it can be enhanced or improved. And basically, if you try to go back to your childhood and try to think about how you play, I remember when I was a child, I always loved making new things, and I always loved to play with my Barbie dolls. And I tried to make scenarios in my head that the Barbie doll can fly using a drone and so on and so forth. And who would have thought that drones are now present? So I think that's something that innovativeness and creativity is something innate, especially for us Filipinos, because remember that we are very resourceful. That's one thing that one habit of us Filipinos. We're very resourceful, and so we try to make things new out of the existing materials that we have. I remember also when I was in college, I was in UST, and I was stranded in the in one of the streets in UST, which is flooded, and one of the people, or that time no pedicabs were allowed. So what the pedicab drivers did was to make use of an old ref to transport people from one place to another. And that for me is actually an innovation. Now, you don't need skills, you don't need the formal training to become innovative, because sometimes our innovative skills actually shows when the need arises. So that's something that we can think about whenever we do innovations. So it's not actually a question if it's innate or it's a skill can be inherited or it can be learned. But what's important thing is that we all have that creativity inside of us that we need to really unleash. And perhaps the role of our managers, if we have our managers here, is to try to find out, try to foster an environment in our offices, in our organizations, to unleash that creativity and try to promote psychological safety in our workplace. You can be creative, you can be innovative, regardless of whoever you are or whatever your skill set you have.
Thank you again, Ms. Leanne and Sir Adrian, for taking the time to introduce us to innovative thinking in the public sector. We hope to have you again in our future webinars. And on behalf of the Academy, I would like to thank everyone for watching. We hope you learned a lot today, and we hope to see you again tomorrow, 2 p.m. Philippine Standard Time, for our next topic, Innovating Basic Education Amidst the COVID-19 Pandemic, the case of DepEd Antique. Only here at the Public Sector Productivity Webinars. Okay, thank you everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank
It has
you
been
very
our pleasure.
much.
See you.
See you again soon.
Okay, bye.